Welcome back to Bargirl Baddies. Today's story is about a man who thought he had it all figured out. Robert Chen, 58 years old, former logistics manager from Calgary, Alberta, decided that early retirement in Thailand was going to be his salvation after a brutal divorce and 20 years of soul-crushing Canadian winters. He watched the YouTube videos, crunched the numbers, and bought a one-way ticket to paradise. What he found instead was a masterclass in how quickly dreams can turn into financial ruin and emotional devastation. By the time Robert realized what was happening, he'd lost $50,000, his dignity, and almost his will to start over. This isn't a story about villainy or evil. It's about loneliness, about the lies we tell ourselves when we're desperate for connection, and about how comfort in a foreign land can become the most expensive drug you've ever tried. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. If you've ever been tempted by the retirement abroad fantasy, or if you know someone who lived it, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. This is Robert's story, in his own words. I need you to understand what my life looked like before Thailand, because without that context, you won't get why I made the choices I did. February 2024, Calgary. I'm sitting in my one-bedroom apartment on the 5th floor of a building that smells like old carpet and other people's cooking. It's minus 32 degrees outside. My car didn't start that morning. Battery died for the third time that winter, so I took the bus to work. Stood there freezing my ass off for 20 minutes waiting for a C train that was delayed because of track ice. I'm 58 years old and I'm taking public transit, like I'm 22 again, except when you're 22 it feels like an adventure, and when you're 58 it feels like failure. The divorce was finalised 4 months earlier. 22 years of marriage, gone. Janet got the house in Panorama Hills. I got my retirement savings and a sense of relief so profound it scared me. We'd been unhappy for at least a decade, maybe longer. The kids, Jessica's 26, Michael's 24, they saw it coming before we did. They were almost glad when we finally pulled the plug. But glad doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Michael moved to Vancouver for work and barely calls. Jessica's in Toronto, doing well. But our conversations are surface-level pleasantries. How's work, Dad? Fine, honey. How's the new apartment? We're strangers pretending we're not. My job at Trans-Canada Freight and Logistics was exactly as thrilling as it sounds. I've been there 19 years, managing shipping routes and dealing with trucking companies and spending 8 hours a day in a grey cubicle under fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead. The pay was decent. I cleared about $78,000 a year, but decent pay doesn't make you excited to wake up in the morning. It makes you comfortable enough to not quit, which is its own kind of trap. The divorce settlement left me with about $180,000 Canadian. Janet got the house, which was fair, she put more into it over the years, and I didn't fight her on it. I just wanted out. I took my money, rented this depressing apartment for $1,600 a month, and suddenly realised I had absolutely no idea what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. That's when the YouTube videos started. I'd come home from work, heat up some frozen dinner, pour myself a whiskey, and fall into this rabbit hole of expat retirement channels, living in Thailand on $1,000 a month. Why I'll never return to Canada. Retire like a king in Chiang Mai. Video after video of guys my age, sometimes older, living in these modern condos with pools and balconies, eating incredible-looking food for pocket change, dating women half their age who actually seemed happy to be with them. The weather was always sunny. Everyone was smiling. The comment sections were full of men saying it was the best decision they ever made. I watched this one channel run by a guy named Steve from Arizona. He was 62, retired on a modest pension, living in a place called Pattaya. His condo cost him $350 a month. His total monthly expenses, including food, entertainment, transportation, health insurance, everything under $1,500. He had a girlfriend named Pim who was maybe 35, and in his videos she'd cook for him, laugh at his jokes, rub his shoulders while he did his video intros. He looked genuinely happy. More happy than I'd been in 20 years. I started doing the math obsessively. If I could live on 2,000 Canadian a month, hell, even 2,500 to be safe, my 180,000 in savings would last me 6 years, maybe 7. By then, I'd be 65 and could tap into my Canada pension plan and old age security. I could make this work. I could actually retire early, leave the grey cubicle and the brutal winters, and the loneliness of this apartment behind. The decision happened on a Wednesday in late February. I remember the exact day because it was the day Janet's lawyer sent me another email about splitting my remaining pension contributions, nickel and diming me over amounts that wouldn't even matter in the long run. I was sitting at my desk at TransCanada, staring at shipping manifests for a load of automotive parts going to Montreal, and something in me just snapped. I thought, what the hell am I doing? I'm 58 years old, I'm single, I have no mortgage, no debt, and enough money to start over somewhere warm. Why am I still here? I opened a new browser tab and booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok. Departure date, March 18th. Cost, $9.40 Canadian, including baggage. I gave my notice at work that afternoon. My manager looked confused, asked if I had another job lined up. I said I was retiring abroad. He laughed, thought I was joking. When he realized I wasn't, he just shrugged and said he processed the paperwork. I told Jessica over the phone. She was worried, asked a lot of questions I didn't have good answers for. Did I have a plan? Where would I live? Did I know anyone there? I fed her the lines I'd memorized from YouTube videos. Thailand has great healthcare, huge expat community. Cost of living is a fraction of Canada. I'd be fine. She made me promise to stay in touch and be careful. I promised. I don't think she believed I'd actually go through with it. Michael didn't even try to hide his skepticism. "Dad, you're running away," he said bluntly. "You know that, right?" I got defensive, told him I was running towards something, not away. He said, "Okay, whatever, just don't do anything stupid." That was the last real conversation we had before I left. March 18th, I landed in Bangkok Suvarnabhumi Airport, 9:30 at night local time. The moment I stepped out of the airport into the arrivals area, the heat hit me like walking into a physical wall. It was 32 degrees at night. Not Celsius, actual, humid, thick warmth that made my shirt stick to my back immediately. After 6 months of Canadian winter, it felt like being born into a different world. I'd booked a bus ticket online to Pattaya, a beach city about 2 hours south of Bangkok. Steve from Arizona lived there, and half the retirement videos I watched featured it. The bus was comfortable, air-conditioned, cost me 320 baht, about 12 Canadian dollars. I watched Thailand slide past the windows in the dark, neon lights and street food carts and motorbikes weaving through traffic in ways that would cause accidents in Canada, but somehow worked here. Pattaya at midnight was chaos in the best possible way. I checked into a small hotel I'd found on Agoda, a place on Soi Buakhao for 12,000 baht a month, about 460 Canadian, less than I'd spent on groceries some months back home. The room was basic but clean, air conditioning, small bathroom, double bed, a balcony that looked out onto the street below where motorbikes buzzed past at all hours. I couldn't sleep that first night. Jet lag, sure, but also this electric feeling in my chest like I'd just escaped from prison. I stood on the balcony at 3 in the morning, watching the street, smelling cooking oil and exhaust, and something floral I couldn't identify, listening to voices in Thai and the rumble of engines and distant music from bars that never seemed to close. I thought, this is it. This is what starting over feels like. The first week was pure sensory overload in the most incredible way. I'd wake up without an alarm, throw on shorts and a t-shirt, walk down to a local cafe where an older Thai woman served coffee for 40 baht, and these little pork buns for 20 baht each. She didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Thai. But we'd smile and nod, and somehow it worked. The coffee was sweet and strong, and came in a plastic bag with a straw. I'd sit on a plastic stool on the sidewalk, watching the city wake up, feeling the heat build as the sun rose, and think about how in Calgary I'd be scraping ice off my windshield right now. I found the Lonely Buffalo my third day in Pattaya. It was an expat bar on Soi Lenki, the kind of place that opened at 10 in the morning and filled up with retired Western men drinking beer and watching sports on multiple TVs. The owner was a British guy named Colin, maybe 65. He'd been in Thailand for 20 years. He introduced me around, and within an hour I'd met Graham from Melbourne, Pete from Manchester, and 2 Americans named Don and Rick who were both ex-military living on pensions. These guys became my crash course in Pattaya expat life. They explained the visa situation. I could do visa runs every 60 days or get a retirement visa if I kept 800,000 baht in a Thai bank account. They told me which areas were good to rent in, which bars were tourist traps, where to get a massage that was actually a massage, and where to get the other kind if I was interested. They warned me about bar fines and lady drinks and buffalo stories. Family emergencies that always needed money. They were cynical, but in a protective, brotherly way, like they'd all been burned before and wanted to help me avoid the same mistakes. I settled into a routine, fast. Morning coffee at the local cafe. Late breakfast at the Lonely Buffalo, usually eggs and toast for 90 baht. Beach time in the afternoon when it wasn't too hot, or I'd sit by the pool in my hotel. I started getting massages twice a week at a place near my hotel, 300 baht for an hour, which is about 11 Canadian dollars for something that would cost 80 bucks back home. Dinner was always an adventure, trying different Thai restaurants, pad Thai and green curry and som tam that made my eyes water. Then drinks at night, either at the Lonely Buffalo or one of the other expat bars, talking to guys who all had similar stories of escape. My money was stretching impossibly far. I tracked every expense in a little notebook. Rent, 12,000 baht, food, maybe 10,000 baht a month. Entertainment and drinks, another 8,000. Massages and incidentals, 5,000. Total monthly expenses, around 35,000 baht, which was about 1,350 Canadian dollars. I was living better than I had in Calgary for less than my old apartment's rent. The math was working. I felt vindicated. That's when I met Nim. It was my 6th week in Pattaya, late April. Graham from the Lonely Buffalo crew convinced me to check out Walking Street, the famous nightlife strip that everyone talks about. I'd been avoiding it, felt uncomfortable with the whole scene. Rows of bars, with girls in bikinis dancing on poles, touts trying to pull you inside, everything neon and loud, and obviously transactional. But Graham said I needed to see it at least once. It was part of the Pattaya experience. We went to a beer bar called Crystal, one of the slightly more relaxed places off the main strip. Open-air seating, music playing but not deafening, about 8 or 9 girls working. I ordered a Chang beer. Graham got into conversation with one of the girls he knew, and then she appeared. Nim. She told me later her real name was something longer and more complicated, but everyone called her Nim. She was 34 years old, which seemed almost age-appropriate compared to some of the men I'd seen with girls who looked barely 20. She wore jeans and a simple black top, wasn't dancing or being overtly flirtatious like some of the others. She just sat down next to me, ordered herself a lady drink after asking if it was okay, and started talking. Her English was decent, better than my non-existent Thai anyway. She asked where I was from, how long I'd been in Thailand, if I liked Pattaya. Normal conversation, nothing pushy. She had this laugh that was genuinely infectious, and when she smiled her whole face changed. We talked for maybe 2 hours. She told me about growing up in Isan, the poor northeastern region of Thailand, about her 9-year-old daughter who lived with her mother back in the village, about working in Bangkok in a factory before coming to Pattaya because the money was better here. I asked the question everyone asks, trying to be delicate about it, why this job? She didn't get offended. She said simply, I need to take care of my daughter, my mother. Factory work pay maybe 9,000 baht 1 month. Here I can make 30, 40,000, send money home. I'm not proud, but I'm not ashamed. I do what I must do. That honesty floored me. No sob story, no playing victim, just practical reality delivered with a shrug. When the bar started closing around 2 in the morning, I paid her bar fine 1,500 baht to take her out of the bar for the night, and we went to a late-night restaurant and ate more food and talked more. She asked about my divorce, about my kids, actually seemed interested in the answers. When I dropped her back at her apartment on my rented motorbike at 4 in the morning, she kissed me on the cheek and said she hoped to see me again. I came back the next night, and the night after that. Within a week, I was paying her bar fine every time I visited, which meant she didn't have to sit at the bar or entertain other customers. We'd go to dinner, or to the night market, or just back to my hotel room to talk and watch movies on my laptop. She started teaching me Thai phrases. She took me to a temple one morning, explained the Buddhism basics, showed me how to make an offering properly. By the end of May, she was staying at my place most nights. I stopped paying bar fines because she stopped going to work entirely. We fell into a domestic routine that felt shockingly normal. She'd cook breakfast, we'd spend the day together, she'd video call her daughter in the evenings, and I'd hear this tender, motherly voice come out that was completely different from how she talked to me. When I suggested giving her money for her daughter's school fees and her mother's medication, she cried and hugged me and said I was the kindest man she'd ever met. 15,000 baht a month. About 570 Canadian dollars. It seemed like nothing for what I was getting. Companionship, affection, someone who actually wanted to spend time with me. The guys at the Lonely Buffalo noticed the change in me. Graham pulled me aside one afternoon, said, "Mate, just be careful. I know she seems different, but they all seemed different at first." I brushed him off, told him Nim wasn't like that. He was just cynical because he'd been burned. Looking back now, I can see exactly what I was doing. I was buying a fantasy, not just sex or companionship. I was buying the fantasy that I mattered to someone, that a beautiful younger woman could see past my age and my weight and my ordinariness and genuinely care about me. And Nim was selling that fantasy beautifully, because she was good at her job and because, in her own way, she probably did care about me. Just not the way I needed her to. But in those early months, in the golden glow of the honeymoon phase, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was thinking about how her hand felt in mine when we walked on the beach. How she'd kiss me good morning and call me her handsome man, even though I caught my reflection in the mirror and knew I was neither handsome nor young. How the loneliness that had followed me from Calgary finally seemed to be lifting. If only I'd known that in Thailand, comfort comes with a price tag I couldn't yet see, and that price tag was about to come due in ways that would leave me broke, humiliated, and forced to rebuild everything I thought I'd escaped. By June 2024, I'd been in Pattaya for 3 months, and I'd stopped thinking of it as a vacation or an experiment. This was my life now. The initial magic hadn't worn off exactly, but it had transformed into something more settled, more routine. I'd moved out of my basic hotel room on Soi Buakau and into a nicer condo in Bretonnac, the quieter hillside area south of the main city. 18th floor, 1 bedroom with a proper living room, balcony overlooking the bay, pool and gym in the building. 18,000 baht a month, about 690 Canadian dollars. Still cheaper than my depressing Calgary apartment, and infinitely nicer. Nim had moved in with me without us ever really discussing it. Her clothes appeared in my closet gradually, her toiletries took over half the bathroom counter, and suddenly we were playing house. She'd wake up before me most mornings, make coffee the Thai way with condensed milk, and we'd sit on the balcony watching the city wake up below us. It felt domestic and comfortable, and real, in a way my marriage to Janet never had, at least not in the last decade. My daily routine had calcified into something predictable. Wake up around 9 or 10, no alarm clock, because what did I need an alarm for? Breakfast with Nim, usually something she'd cook, or we'd walk down to a local market and eat there. Then we'd head to the pool, or sometimes the beach at Dong Tan if it wasn't too hot. Afternoons were for drinking. Not heavily, or at least, I didn't think it was heavy at the time. 3 or 4 large Chang beers between lunch and dinner, sitting at the Lonely Buffalo with Graham and the crew, watching whatever sport happened to be on the TVs, talking about nothing important. Dinner was always out, always Thai food, or sometimes pizza, if I was craving something Western. Then more drinks in the evening, whiskey, usually, blend 285 or Hong Thong, because the imported stuff was expensive and the local whiskey was cheap and did the job just fine. Nim would drink with me sometimes, sweet cocktails or those little bottles of beer, but she never got drunk. She'd stay present and laughing while I got progressively hazier, and she'd make sure I got home safely when I'd had too much. Looking back, I can see I was drinking more than I ever had in Calgary. But it didn't feel like a problem because everyone around me was doing the same thing. Expat life in Pattaya revolves around bars and beer and passing time. When you don't have a job to go to, no real obligations, no structure to your days, drinking becomes the structure. It marks time. It gives you something to do. And in the heat and the endless summer, with cheap booze and no one to answer to, it just becomes normal. The money was flowing out faster than I'd planned. I'd budgeted for 2,000 Canadian a month, maybe 2,500 at most. By July, I was spending closer to 3,500, sometimes 4,000. The nicer condo was more expensive. Eating out twice a day added up. The drinks, the massages, the random shopping trips with Nim where she'd see a dress or shoes, and I'd buy them because her happiness felt like my happiness. Bar tabs at the Lonely Buffalo that somehow always ended up higher than I expected. A rented motorbike at 4,000 baht a month because taking taxis everywhere was annoying. I checked my Canadian bank account in early July and saw I was down to about $130,000 from my starting 180, 50,000 gone in less than 4 months. The math startled me for about an hour, and then I rationalised it. Startup costs, I told myself. Getting established always costs more upfront. Things would level off now that I was settled. I'd be more careful going forward. Nim had stopped working at Crystal Bar completely. I was supporting her fully now, the 15,000 baht a month for her daughter and mother, plus she lived with me rent-free. I paid for all our food and entertainment, and I'd started just giving her extra cash here and there when she needed it. 500 baht for her phone bill, 1,000 for new sandals, 2,000 to send home for her niece's school uniform. It never seemed like that much in the moment, a couple hundred baht here and there, but it accumulated. Then the emergency started. The first one was in August. Nim got a phone call early one morning, talked rapidly in Thai for several minutes, then hung up crying. Her younger brother, she explained, had been in a motorcycle accident in their village. He needed surgery on his leg. The village hospital wasn't equipped to handle it. They'd have to take him to a bigger hospital in Udon Thani. The cost would be 80,000 baht. Her family didn't have that kind of money. Could I help? 80,000 baht was about 3,000 Canadian dollars. Not a small amount, but also not devastating. And her brother was hurt, potentially seriously. What kind of person would I be if I said no? I transferred the money to her account that afternoon. Nim cried again, but this time with gratitude. She held my face in her hands and said I'd saved her brother's life, that her family would never forget this kindness, that I was more than her boyfriend, I was family now. The gratitude felt incredible. I'm not proud of admitting this, but being seen as a hero, as someone who could solve problems with money that seemed huge to her family but manageable to me, it fed something in my ego I didn't know was hungry. In Calgary, I'd been nobody special, just another middle-aged divorced guy. Here, I was someone's saviour. Her brother recovered fine, from what Nim told me. She showed me photos on her phone of him back home with a cast on his leg, smiling and giving a thumbs up. She video called her mother, who spoke no English but pressed her hands together in a Y gesture through the screen and said what I assumed was thank you over and over. It felt good. It felt real. September brought another emergency. The family farm's water pump had broken down. Without it, they couldn't irrigate their rice fields and the crop would fail. A new pump cost 45,000 baht. Again, Nim came to me in tears. Again, I paid. This time, with slightly more hesitation, but she explained that the rice crop was how her mother survived, how they fed themselves, and without it, they'd have to buy all their food, and the family couldn't afford that on top of everything else. 45,000 baht, about 1,700 Canadian. I transferred it. Nim's gratitude was even more intense this time. That night, she made love to me with what felt like genuine passion. Told me she loved me, that she'd never met a man as good as me. I wanted desperately to believe her. Graham noticed the pattern before I did. We were sitting at the Lonely Buffalo one afternoon in late September, and I mentioned offhandedly that I'd helped Nim's family with some expenses. He set his beer down and looked at me with this expression that was half pity, half frustration. "Mate, how much have you given her?" he asked. I was defensive immediately. "It's not like that. Her brother was actually hurt. I saw the photos." I'm sure he was. They don't usually lie about the buffalo dying or the brother's accident. Those things probably happen. But ask yourself, why is it always your money that fixes it? Where's the rest of the family? Where are her sisters, her cousins, her uncles? In Thai families, everyone chips in. But somehow, the Farang boyfriend is always the only solution. I told him Nim was different, that he was just cynical because he'd been burned. He shook his head. "We've all been where you are, Robert. Every single one of us sitting at this bar. We all thought our girl was different. Just be careful, yeah? Set some boundaries. Because once they know you'll pay, the emergencies never stop." I didn't want to hear it. I changed the subject and finished my beer in silence. Later that night, lying in bed with Nim asleep beside me, I thought about what Graham had said. But then Nim shifted in her sleep and put her arm across my chest, and I pushed the doubts away. Graham was wrong. Nim cared about me. I could feel it. My contact with Jessica and Michael had dwindled to almost nothing by this point. Jessica would WhatsApp me every couple weeks, asking how I was doing, if I was being safe. I'd send her photos of beaches and food, tell her everything was great, that I'd never been happier. I didn't tell her about Nim. I'm not sure why. Maybe because I knew how it would sound. Maybe because I didn't want to hear her worry, or worse, her judgment. Michael had basically stopped reaching out entirely. We'd exchanged brief messages on birthdays or holidays, but that was it. My son was getting on with his life in Vancouver, and I was getting on with mine in Thailand, and the distance between us wasn't just geographical anymore. The isolation from my old life was nearly complete. I had no job, no responsibilities, no connections to Canada except a bank account that was slowly draining, and 2 adult children who felt more like acquaintances than family. My entire world had shrunk to Pattaya, to the Lonely Buffalo, to Nim and our condo, and the daily rhythm of beach, drinks, dinner, sleep, repeat. October was when things shifted in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. Nim started getting moodier. Some days she'd be affectionate and chatty. Other days she'd be distant, on her phone constantly, texting in Thai. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd say her mother or her sister, nothing important. When I'd try to look at her screen playfully, she'd angle it away or lock it quickly. She started taking phone calls on the balcony, speaking in rapid Thai that I couldn't follow. They'd last 20 minutes, sometimes longer. When she'd come back inside, I'd ask if everything was okay. She'd say yes, just family stuff, nothing to worry about. But her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. At least not as often. I suggested we take a trip together, maybe go to Chiang Mai for a week, explore somewhere new. Nim said no immediately. She needed to stay in Pattaya. Her family might need her. What if there was another emergency and she was too far away? I said we'd only be a few hours by plane, but she was adamant. The conversation ended with her getting upset, saying I didn't understand how important family was in Thai culture, that I was being selfish. I apologized. I didn't bring it up again. The drinking increased. Not just mine, though I was easily putting away 5 or 6 beers every afternoon now, and half a bottle of whiskey most nights. But Nim started drinking more too. She'd mix whiskey with soda water and ice and sip it all evening, and as she drank, she'd get either very affectionate or very quiet. The quiet nights were worse. She'd stare at her phone or out at the balcony view and seem a million miles away. And when I'd ask what she was thinking about, she'd say nothing, just tired. One night in early November, I woke up around 3 in the morning and she wasn't in bed. I found her on the balcony, smoking a cigarette. I didn't know she smoked. She said she used to, years ago, and sometimes when she was stressed she'd have one. What was she stressed about? I asked. She just shook her head, stubbed out the cigarette, and came back to bed. We didn't talk about it. Despite all of this, despite the mood shifts and the phone calls and the growing sense that something was off, I was in too deep to walk away. The alternative to being with Nim was being alone again, and I'd already lived that life in Calgary. I knew what that emptiness felt like. This, even with its complications and red flags, was better, or at least I told myself it was. By mid-November, Nim started talking about the future. She'd bring it up casually at first, wondering aloud what we'd do long-term, if I planned to stay in Thailand forever, if I ever thought about settling down somewhere quieter than Pattaya. I said sure, I was open to it. Pattaya was fun, but it wasn't somewhere I wanted to live permanently. That's when she mentioned the land. Her uncle owned property in her home village in Isan, she explained. Beautiful land. 3 ray, which is about half a hectare. Fruit trees, good soil, quiet area. He wanted to sell because he was getting old and couldn't maintain it. If we bought it, we could build a house there, maybe a small guest house for tourists, or just a place for us to retire to eventually. Somewhere peaceful, away from the bar scene and the chaos of Pattaya, a real home. The idea appealed to me more than I wanted to admit. I was getting tired of Pattaya, of the same bars and the same conversations with drunk expats, and the feeling that every day was the same as the last. The thought of having land, a house, something permanent and real, something that was ours, it represented the stability I'd been searching for. How much would the land cost? I asked. Nim said she'd have to check with her uncle, but probably around 1.2 million baht, about 46,000 Canadian dollars. My stomach dropped. That was a massive amount, nearly a quarter of what I had left. I told her I needed to think about it. She said, of course, no pressure. It was just an idea. But over the next few weeks, she brought it up more frequently. She showed me photos of the village, the land, the area. She talked about how we could design the house, maybe have a little garden, how her family was nearby so I'd never be lonely, how it would be an investment. Land values in Thailand always went up, and foreigners couldn't own land anyway, so it would have to be in her name, but it would be ours, our future together. The rationalization machine in my head started working overtime. The land was a good investment. Property did appreciate in Thailand. I couldn't stay in a rented condo forever. Nim and I had been together for 7 months now. That wasn't nothing. She'd introduced me to her daughter over video chat, a shy 9-year-old who called me uncle. Her family knew about me. This was a real relationship heading somewhere real. But underneath the rationalization was something darker that I didn't want to examine. I was scared that if I said no, she'd leave. That this was a test of my commitment, and failing it meant losing her. I'd already invested so much, emotionally and financially. Walking away now would mean admitting it was all a mistake. That Graham and the others were right, that I'd been played. My pride wouldn't let me believe that. The internal debate consumed me through late November and into December. I'd wake up resolved to say no. It was too much money, too risky. Then Nim would make breakfast and smile at me in that way she had, or she'd curl up against me on the couch watching TV. And I'd think maybe it was okay. Maybe this was what building a life together looked like. Just one more week to think about it, I told myself. Then another week, then another. And then the decision made itself because I couldn't stand the uncertainty anymore. Couldn't stand the look of hopeful expectation in Nim's eyes every time the subject came up. On December 10th, I went to Bangkok Bank and initiated a wire transfer of 1.3 million baht to Nim's account. The extra 100,000 was for legal fees and paperwork, she'd explained. 48,000 Canadian dollars, almost exactly. The bank teller asked me to confirm the amount twice. I confirmed it. My hands were shaking as I signed the forms. Nim was overjoyed when I told her. She cried, kissed me, said I'd made her the happiest woman in Thailand. She promised we'd go up to her village in 2 weeks to see the land and meet with her uncle and sign all the papers. She called her mother right there, told her the news in Thai, and her mother's excited voice came through the phone speaker. That night, we celebrated. Nim cooked a special dinner. We drank expensive wine I bought from Villa Market. We made love, and she told me she loved me over and over. I fell asleep feeling like I'd done something right, like I'd invested in our future, like I was building something real. The money transferred on a Wednesday morning. Thursday passed normally. Nim said she was arranging everything with her uncle. The paperwork would take a few days, but then we'd make the trip to Isan together. Friday morning, her phone rang early. She answered, spoke in Thai for a few minutes, then hung up looking distressed. Her mother had fallen suddenly ill, she told me. Something with her heart. Nim needed to go to the village immediately. I offered to come with her. She said no, it would be too stressful. Lots of hospital time. Her family would be upset and emotional. It was better if she went alone. She'd be back in 3 or 4 days, 5 at most. She packed a small bag, kissed me goodbye at the door, told me she loved me, and thanked me again for everything. I watched her get into a taxi from our balcony. I waved. She waved back. That was the last time I saw her. Thursday, Friday, Saturday passed. I sent line messages. They showed as delivered but not read. I called her number. It rang but went to voicemail. I told myself she was busy with her mother. Hospitals don't always have good phone reception. She'd call when she could. Sunday morning, I woke up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach that I couldn't shake. I called again. Still voicemail. I sent more messages. Still unread. By Sunday evening, I was in full panic mode. I must have called 30 times. Every call went to voicemail. Monday morning, I called, and the number was disconnected. Out of service. I tried Line, tried Facebook Messenger, tried everything. All my messages sat there unread. And the phone number that had been Nim's lifeline to me for 7 months was just gone. I sat on the couch in our condo, staring at my phone, cycling through denial and rage and a dawning, sickening realization that I'd just lost $48,000 and the woman I thought loved me in one clean disappearing act. And the worst part, the part that made me want to vomit, was that I'd seen it coming. Graham had warned me. The pattern had been obvious, and I'd ignored every single red flag because I needed so desperately to believe that someone could love me, that I mattered, that I wasn't just a walking ATM with a pulse and a foreign passport. I didn't leave the condo for 3 days. I couldn't. The weight of what had happened pinned me to the couch like physical gravity. I'd wake up, check my phone compulsively even though I knew there'd be nothing, try to call Nim's disconnected number just to hear the out-of-service message, then sit there staring at the wall until hours had passed without me noticing. The line messages I'd sent her sat there in an accusatory row, all marked as delivered but never read. Nim, please call me. Are you okay? I'm worried about your mother. Please just let me know you're safe. Nim, what's happening? And finally, on the 3rd day, I know you're not coming back. Just tell me why. That last message felt pathetic, even as I sent it. This desperate plea for closure from someone who'd already gotten everything she wanted from me and had no reason to respond. But I sent it anyway, because the not knowing was somehow worse than knowing the truth. Tuesday afternoon, I finally forced myself to leave the condo. I went to Crystal Bar, where I'd met Nim back in April. The place looked different in daylight, sadder, with only 2 girls working the empty room and bad Thai pop music playing from tinny speakers. The Mama San, a woman in her 50s with hard eyes and a tired face, was sitting at the bar doing paperwork. I asked if she'd seen Nim. She looked up at me, and I saw recognition in her expression, followed immediately by something that looked like pity. She shook her head. No, she hadn't seen Nim. Nim hadn't worked there in months. Did I have another number for her? I asked. The Mama-san said no. Sorry, she didn't keep track of girls after they stopped working. I showed her photos of Nim on my phone, like somehow that would help. The Mama-san glanced at them and said yes, that was Nim. She'd worked there for about 8 months before I met her. Good girl, sent money to her family. Then she looked at me directly and asked, how much you give her? The question hit me like a slap. I didn't answer. The Mama-san sighed and said in broken English, you not first, she good girl, but she need money for family. Many Farang come, fall in love, give money. This is Thailand. You understand? I left without saying anything else. I walked down to Walking Street, even though it was only 3 in the afternoon and most of the bars were closed or empty. I found a beer bar that was open, ordered a chang, and started showing Nim's photo to the girls working there. One of them, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 22, looked at the photo and giggled, then covered her mouth. Her friend said something to her in Thai, and they both looked at me with expressions I couldn't read. You know her? I asked. The young one nodded. I know Nim. She, my friend before. Do you know where she is? Do you have her number? She shook her head. She go back. I san maybe. She finish work, Pattaya already. Finish work? What do you mean, finish work? The girl looked uncomfortable. She said something in Thai to her friend, then back to me in English. Nim have good customer, send money for family, now she go home. This normal, you understand? I understood. I finally, completely, devastatingly understood. I paid for my beer without drinking it and walked back to my condo. The sun was brutal, the heat oppressive, and the walk up the hill to Pratumnak felt like climbing a mountain. By the time I got back to my 18th floor apartment, I was drenched in sweat, and the reality of my situation had fully crystallized. I'd been played. Expertly, patiently, systematically played by someone who was very good at her job. And her job wasn't just working in a bar. Her job was identifying lonely, desperate foreign men with money and extracting as much of it as possible while making them feel loved. That night, I called the tourist police. I explained the situation to an officer who spoke decent English. I told him about the land purchase, the wire transfer, the disappearance. He listened patiently, took notes, asked if I had a contract for the land sale. I didn't. Did I have Nim's ID card number or her real name? I didn't. I had a first name that was probably a nickname, a phone number that was disconnected, and a line account that would never be read again. The officer was kind but blunt. Without a contract, without proper identification, without any documentation of what the money was for, there was nothing they could do. These situations happened frequently. Thai women and foreign men, promises made, money transferred, then the woman disappears. Technically, it wasn't even illegal unless I could prove fraud, and proving fraud required evidence I didn't have. But I have bank records, I said. I can prove I sent her the money. Yes, but can you prove what the money was for? Can you prove she promised to buy land and didn't? Or did you give money to your girlfriend and now she's gone? These are different things in law. He was right, and I knew it. I'd voluntarily transferred money to someone I was in a relationship with. There was no contract, no deed, no legal agreement of any kind. I just trusted her, and trust isn't legally binding. I spent the rest of that week in a haze of alcohol and self-recrimination. I'd go to the Lonely Buffalo in the morning, start drinking, and not stop until I stumbled back to my condo at midnight. Graham found me there on Thursday afternoon, already 6 beers deep, and sat down next to me without saying anything for a while. Finally, he asked, "She's gone, isn't she?" I nodded. I couldn't look at him. How much? 48,000 Canadian, plus probably another 20 or 25 over the months before that in smaller amounts, maybe 70,000 total. Graham whistled low. Fuck, mate. I'm sorry. You warned me. You all warned me. I didn't listen. We never listen. That's the thing about this place. We all think we're different. Our girl is different. Our situation is special. And then it isn't. I asked him if it had happened to him. He laughed bitterly and said of course it had, 8 years ago. A woman named Nock, who he supported for a year and a half before she disappeared with about 30,000 Australian dollars, said her mother needed kidney surgery. He paid for everything, the surgery, the hospital stay, medications, all of it. Then, one day, Nock was just gone. He found out later the mother was fine, had never been sick. The money went to building a house in Nock's village for her and her real boyfriend. That's the game, Graham said. They're not evil people. They're just surviving. And we're the marks because we're desperate enough to believe that a beautiful 30-year-old woman could actually love our 58-year-old ass for reasons that have nothing to do with money. He bought me another beer. We drank in silence for a while. Then he said, "What are you going to do now?" I didn't know. I'd checked my bank account that morning. 8,000 Canadian dollars left. My rent was 18,000 baht a month, about 690 Canadian. My expenses, even if I cut everything to bare minimum, were at least 2,000 a month. I had maybe 3 months before I was completely broke. I could go back to Canada, admit defeat, move back to Calgary with my tail between my legs, try to find some part-time job to supplement whatever pension I could scrape together. Face Jessica and Michael and tell them their father was an idiot who threw away his retirement savings on a woman who never loved him. Face Janet's inevitable "I told you so" expression, even if she was too polite to say it out loud. Or, I could stay in Thailand and figure something out. The idea of returning to Canada felt like death. Not literal death, but the death of possibility. The final admission that I was exactly who I'd been afraid I was. Ordinary, foolish, doomed to a small, grey life. I chose to stay, not because it was smart, but because I couldn't face the alternative. I moved out of the Pratumnak condo at the end of December. I found a studio apartment in Jomtien, a less touristy area south of Pattaya's main beach. 6,000 baht a month, about 230 Canadian dollars. It was tiny, 8th floor, no elevator, no pool, no view except other apartment buildings. The air conditioning barely worked and the hot water was temperamental. But it was cheap. I sold everything I didn't absolutely need. The rented motorbike went back. I stopped eating out twice a day and started cooking rice and simple Thai dishes in my studio's crammed kitchen. I cut the drinking down to 2 beers a day maximum because I couldn't afford more. I stopped going to the Lonely Buffalo because every beer there was money I didn't have. I needed income. At 59 years old, with no work permit and no Thai language skills, my options were limited. I found work teaching English online through one of those platforms where you video chat with students in China and Korea. The pay was $15 an hour, and I could usually get 3 or 4 hours of work a day if I was lucky. $60 a day, maybe $1,200 a month on good months. It wasn't enough to save anything, but it was enough to survive. The work was mind-numbing. Teaching basic English phrases to disinterested teenagers over spotty internet connections. Smiling and encouraging them through a screen while my little studio apartment baked in the Thai heat, and I wondered how the hell my life had arrived at this point. I started walking for exercise since I couldn't afford a gym membership anymore. Long walks along Jomtien Beach in the early morning before the heat became unbearable. The beach was quieter than Pattaya, more local, fewer tourists. I'd watch Thai families having picnics, old men doing Tai Chi, and I'd think about how I was now living among them instead of above them in some expat bubble. The isolation was profound. I'd cut myself off from the expat bar scene because one couldn't afford to participate anymore, and because seeing those guys reminded me too much of who I'd been and what I'd lost. I hadn't made any Thai friends despite living in the country for 9 months. My entire social world had been Nim and the expats at the Lonely Buffalo, and now both were gone. January 2025 arrived. New year, new me. Except I was just old me but broken and poor. I finally worked up the courage to video call Jessica. I hadn't spoken to her since before Nim disappeared. She answered looking concerned, and the first thing she said was, "Dad, you look terrible. Have you been eating?" I had lost weight. Not intentionally, just because I was eating less and walking more, and stress has a way of burning through you. I told her I was fine, just adjusting to a simpler lifestyle. She didn't believe me. She asked pointed questions. Was I still in Thailand? Yes. Was I safe? Yes. Did I have enough money? The pause before I answered told her everything. Dad, what happened? And I told her. Not everything, but enough. I told her about Nim, about the money, about being an idiot who thought a beautiful woman could love him for who he was instead of what he could provide. I told her I was teaching English online now, living in a cheap apartment, getting by, but not exactly thriving. Jessica was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm not going to say I told you so, but Dad, you need to come home. I told her I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The thought of returning to Canada felt impossible, like trying to fit back into a skin I'd shed. I was ashamed, yes, but more than that, I was stubborn. I'd made this choice, and I needed to see it through, whatever that meant. She didn't push, but she made me promise to call her every week. She said she'd send me some money if I needed it. I told her absolutely not. I wouldn't take money from my daughter. I'd created this mess and I'd figure it out. She said the offer stood anyway. After we hung up, I sat on my narrow bed in my tiny studio and cried for the first time since Nim had disappeared. Not for the money, really. Money is just money. I cried for the profound stupidity of my choices, for the willful blindness, for the desperate need to be loved that had made me vulnerable to someone who saw that need and exploited it with professional efficiency. But here's the thing about hitting bottom. You eventually stop falling. Somewhere in February, something shifted. I was walking on the beach early one morning, watching the sun come up over the Gulf of Thailand, and I realised I wasn't angry at Nim anymore. I probably should have been, but I wasn't. She'd done what she needed to do to survive and support her family. In her position, with her options, would I have done any different? The Bargirl economy in Thailand exists because of structural poverty and because foreign men create the demand. She was just meeting that demand in the most effective way she knew how. I'd convinced myself our relationship was real. But if I'm being honest, I'd known from the beginning what it was. I'd just chosen to believe my own fantasy because the fantasy was better than my reality. The person I was really angry at was myself. Not for being scammed exactly, but for running away in the first place. For thinking that geography could solve the internal problems I'd never addressed. The loneliness I felt in Calgary had followed me to Pattaya because it was never about Calgary. It was about me. About the empty spaces inside that I tried to fill with a new country, a younger woman, and a fantasy of starting over. You can't run from yourself. That's the lesson I learned the expensive way. The wounds I carried, the divorce, the disconnection from my kids, the sense of having wasted my life on work that didn't matter. None of that changed when I bought a plane ticket. I just carried it all with me to a different climate. March came. I'd been in Thailand for a full year. I was surviving on about 1,500 Canadian dollars a month, teaching English to bored teenagers, eating street food, living in a studio with unreliable air conditioning. By any objective measure, I'd failed. I'd lost most of my retirement savings, destroyed the comfortable early retirement I'd planned, and gained nothing except humiliation and a story that made me the punchline. But there were small victories I hadn't expected. I'd learned some Thai, enough to order food and have basic conversations with my neighbours. I'd figured out how to cook Thai food reasonably well. I'd gotten in better shape from all the walking. I'd learned to be alone with myself without constant distraction, which was harder than it sounds, but valuable in ways I couldn't quite articulate. I'd also learned what I was actually worth, separate from my bank account. When you strip away the money and the ability to solve problems by throwing cash at them, what's left? In my case, not much at first. But slowly, incrementally, I started building something real. Teaching English wasn't glamorous, but some of my students actually improved, and that felt meaningful. The Thai family who lived in the apartment below mine started inviting me to their dinners sometimes, and I'd sit with them eating some tam and practicing my terrible Thai while their kids laughed at my pronunciation. I reconnected with Jessica properly. Weekly video calls turned into genuine conversations. She told me about her life, her job, her boyfriend. I told her about my teaching work, my walks, my small apartment. We were honest with each other in a way we never had been before. She said I seemed different, maybe better, despite everything. I told her I felt like I'd gone through some kind of fire and come out the other side changed, though I wasn't sure yet if the change was for better or worse. Michael reached out in April, first time in nearly a year. He'd heard from Jessica what happened. He didn't lecture me or say anything about how he'd warned me. He just asked if I was okay and if I needed anything. We talked for an hour. It was the longest conversation we'd had since he was a teenager. He invited me to visit him in Vancouver sometime. I said maybe when I could afford the ticket. As of now, May 2025, I'm still in Thailand. Still in the same studio apartment in Jomtien. Still teaching English online. I've saved up about 4,000 Canadian dollars in the past few months, living as cheaply as possible. It's not much, but it's something. I'm 60 years old next month. My retirement plan is in shambles. I have no idea what the next 10 or 20 years look like. But I'm not running anymore. That's the difference. I'm not hiding in a bottle or in a fantasy relationship or in some imagined future where everything will magically be better. I'm here, present, dealing with the reality I created. It's uncomfortable and it's humbling, and some days it's genuinely hard. But it's real. Do I regret coming to Thailand? That's the question everyone wants answered. The truth is, I don't know. I regret the money I lost. I regret the naivety and the willful blindness. I regret hurting my kids by disappearing into this situation. But I don't regret learning what I learned about myself, about loneliness, about the price we pay for comfort and validation. Would I do it again knowing what I know now? Absolutely not. But I also can't imagine who I'd be right now if I'd stayed in Calgary, kept working my logistics job, lived in that depressing apartment, never taken the risk. Maybe I'd have my retirement savings intact, but maybe I'd also still be that grey, unhappy person standing at a bus stop in -30 degrees, wondering if this was all life had to offer. The expat dream of retiring cheap in Thailand is real for some people. I've met men who've done it successfully, who've found genuine relationships or at least honest arrangements, who've built good lives here within their means. But the dream works when you're running towards something, not away from something. And it works when you can see reality clearly, without the distorting lens of desperation. I was desperate. For connection, for meaning, for proof that I mattered. And Nim saw that desperation and offered me exactly what I was searching for a price. She wasn't a villain. I wasn't a victim. We were just two people engaged in a transaction that I pretended wasn't a transaction until the bill came due. Thailand didn't ruin my life. I made choices, and those choices had consequences. And now I'm living with those consequences while trying to build something sustainable from the wreckage. Some days that feels possible. Other days I sit in my hot little studio apartment eating rice and eggs and wonder what the hell I was thinking. But I'm still here, still standing, still figuring it out one day at a time. The money is gone, and it's not coming back. The fantasy is shattered and good riddance. What's left is just me, the real me, without the comfortable illusions or the convenient lies. And maybe that's worth something. Maybe that's worth more than $50,000. I'm not sure yet. Ask me again in a year. Welcome back to Bargirl Baddies. That was Robert's story, told in his own words from his studio apartment in Jomtien, where he's rebuilding his life, one English lesson at a time. The moral here isn't that Thailand is dangerous, or that all relationships here are scams. The moral is simpler and harder. When you're running from pain instead of healing it, you make yourself vulnerable to people who recognize that pain and know exactly how to exploit it. Robert's mistake wasn't falling in love with the wrong person. His mistake was never learning to love himself enough to see his own worth beyond what his bank account could provide someone else. The geography didn't matter. The age difference didn't matter. What mattered was that he was desperate, and desperation makes us blind to red flags that are obvious to everyone else. If you're watching this and fantasizing about escaping your life for a foreign paradise, I'm not here to tell you not to do it. But ask yourself first, what are you actually running from? Because whatever wounds you're carrying, whatever emptiness you're trying to fill, it's coming with you on that plane. Thailand won't fix it. A younger partner won't fix it. Cheap rent and good weather won't fix it. The only thing that fixes it is doing the hard internal work of figuring out who you are and what you actually need, separate from the fantasy of who you wish you could be. Robert lost $50,000 and learned that lesson. You can learn it for free by listening to his story. The choice is yours. Drop a comment below about where you're watching from and whether you've been tempted by the retirement abroad dream. Have you seen this happen to someone you know? Share your thoughts, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories from the complicated intersection of foreign men, Thai women, and the expensive price of loneliness. Robert still watches the sunset from his balcony in Jomtien. But now, when he sees couples walking on the beach, he doesn't feel envy anymore, just a quiet understanding of how expensive loneliness can be, and how priceless, honest self-awareness becomes when you finally stop running and face yourself in the mirror. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.